I have always had an interest in things mechanical, and after spending a bit of time reading about clocks, decided to buy a grandfather clock on eBay. It duly arrived and worked well for about 5 months and then stopped. It was back to the books to understand what had gone wrong. I established the cause of the fault, but also that it would be expensive to repair. I wanted to get the clock working, so decided then that what I would do is see if I could buy a modern movement, a mechanical movement. And so again, after a bit of research, I came across a manufacturer, Hermle in Germany, which is quite famous for its mechanical clock movements. I decided that my best approach would be to buy a Hermle movement and then basically retrofit it into the grandfather clock, taking the old movement out, putting it aside so at some stage in the future I would perhaps make a proper repair. To do that, it meant I had to rebuild the seat board to suit the much smaller movement, and this video shows you the process I went through in setting up the new Hermle movement in the clock, showing the details of the build and the finished result. We're wrapped in this bubble wrap. There is the movement with the spring and the clock that goes against the actual dial. You can see the scale of it, the big bell here. The chain has 2 chains more or less in line on the clock body, and a kink wheel at the back, the crutch, quite a heavy fly wheel on it, and a post frame, 4 holes in the base, quite a large physical size. The problem with it is that you won't be able to see it from there very easily, but the click or the ratchet against the chain wheel makes against the going wheel, I think it's called, the arm, and the arm has in the past had a soldered on pad that the click stops against. That's worn away, so now the click doesn't hold and it will slip off the arm. The whole wheel has to come out and new pads or a new wheel created, which is going to be quite costly. But I want to have the clock working, the grandfather clock, so I'm going to put this to the side till I can afford to get it repaired and make do with this lesser option, which is the Hermle movement that I'll just show you in a minute. So here's the Hermle box, and it has, I've gone for as similar as I can. I've not gone for complicated chime, Westminster chime. I've gone for a single bell, much as was on the old clock, and chain, but this one is a 7 or an 8 day clock which needs wound once a week, whereas the other clock was, though it was a 30 hour, it needed wound twice a day. So quite a difference in size to accommodate the same this movement into the clock that we set up for this movement. Now, it's no way is it going to tick the same, no way is it going to have the same characteristics in the way it strikes the bell. It's going to be much smaller in its overall presence as a clock. However, it will at least be working. So I thought I would just let you see what I'm trying to do and why I'm trying to do it. It's quite an awkward clock, this one, to actually operate, because the way that the dial marries into it, it comes down onto the top of the frame through two holes. The only way to fix it are through these two posts here that have been fixed to the dial, and they take, that's it upside down, two threaded BA screws into the top of the actual movement, which I can't do. So I'm going to have to create some sort of wooden frame that I can screw that down onto, so as the dial fits like that in the frame at all time, and when I put the clock movement in, I can drop it in and then present it forward so as it then comes through to put the hands on. The new hands that I've got are classic Hermle hands, but I think they're okay in terms of the dimensions. Here, it's best I could get. They are these serpentine style ones, but to fit the Hermle mechanical movement, that was about the best I could do. I can't fit the other hands on, but let's see if I can get those out. The other hand, of course, will like that, and the minute hand will go like that. So I think that size-wise it isn't bad, and I don't think it detracts overall from the look of the clock. Purists would, of course, probably shudder at this, but I think hopefully I will have something that should be okay. According to Hermle, the movement should be good for about 20 years, so we'll see. So if I remove the hood, place down on the floor here, the seat board for the casing is sitting at an angle for the movement that I've just removed, and I'm going to create a new seat board to take the new Hermle movement, because clearly this one's not suited in many ways. It's nailed on, or was nailed on, and the nail heads were sitting fairly proud, about 6mm. So quite simply, using this delicate tool, claw hammer, I prised out the nails. I mean, this has been rehashed, I would guess, not that long ago, 20, 30 years perhaps, maybe not even as much as that. So anyway, I've taken the nails out, and there's the seat board, crudely hacked out, split in bits. It's not that old, again 20, 30 years. I notice here that the bracing across the backboard is screwed in with Phillips head screws. That doesn't mean anything other than someone at some stage has put a backboard on to strengthen up this board that's split. These are oak boards, as is most of this casing, and it's a beautiful colour. So put that to the side. When I thought about putting a new board on it, and this is just pine, so I'm not doing any more than going to make this amount for the Hermle movement. But that still was off. This was rough and hadn't been smoothed out because of the nails that were down into here as well. So using another delicate tool, a rasp, I've squared these off so that the board that I put on it sits without rocking. It's still at the angle though, and so looking for some material that I had in house, 2 bits of hardwood strapping, by putting these on this side there, that levels it. As you can see with the bubble there, perhaps you can't. The level clearly, as I move the clock around, depending on how the floor lies, will throw it off or on. So I'm having to work to what I think is a reasonable level here, because once it's moved into position, that might be slightly off, and I might have to carry out further level adjustments by lifting the case on its corners or setting it up, or how I fix it back. But nonetheless, it is level. It's level to the eye for one, and in terms of the casing, the level matches that. So I cut this board to size. I'm going to screw it on, recess clearance for the pendulum and for the chains, because I'm actually putting in a 7-day or 8-day Hermle movement instead of the 24-hour or 30-hour movement, the original movement that was in the clock that is broken, which I'm going to get fixed and put back in. So this is just a temporary thing that I'm doing. I just miss not having it, and it's the expense of repairing the old clock that's made me move towards the Hermle for the time being, which is an overall total will cost me about £200 as opposed to a £500 fix, which I have to determine whether I think the clock's worth that overall in terms of a repair. So 200, yeah, I can deal with that. I think that's reasonable to get a working clock back. And so overall it will look not too different. It will tick the same because I'm putting a long 94cm Hermle movement pendulum movement in, so it's another long pendulum, but it's a lighter component, so it won't have as pronounced a tick, but it should tick again roughly in line with the same sort of tick that I would get, that I got from this, which is the original pendulum here with its spring on it. So I'll keep that so I can use it in the future when I restore the clock properly. Right, that is it cut to size. So I'm just going to mark off the seat board. I've cut some extension pieces to lift the board height. I'm just going to glue and screw this together, so if I make sure that's reasonably square on the end, which it is, and square on there. You can just judge this by eye. Screw in there. Just use the edge to give it a rough marking. Put these screws down into the wood and a bit of glue across it. So that would be that side. And just there. Okay. Now take these to the small pillar drill I've got and just drill through and countersink it. Glue, fix it together. Okay, that's the board drilled and countersunk. Just apply this to one surface. Here. Just do it. Here's the base plate, sole plate that I had made, and the crack piece has been glued back on, which is now pretty secure. I've also notched back here where the face presents itself to clear the calendar ring and the calendar ring wheels, so as that this will fit flushly against here. The way it will be held is these screws come down through these top pieces in a vertical position onto some brackets that I've made that will fit on here. I used the supports for the shelf. This came as a B&Q shelf, and I decided to put these onto see how it goes again. One on there, and one will go on there. See if I can get that in the shot properly. So in effect, when these are screwed and glued in position, which I already have, the clock face will sit down and rest on here, and this will support then the clock in the middle here. Smaller Hermle clock fits in here, and the reason I've not attached those yet, I have to drill the holes for the chains and clearance to allow the pendulum to swing back and forward through here. But I've made these essentially out of the spare parts that came along with this £4 shelf, and I've just glued them together to give a little bit more strength on it. And once these are screwed in position and glued in, hopefully that will do the job. And this then sits down onto that, secured down through here. I want to try and make sure that this wood won't split, because I've realised this poor softwood has a tendency to do that. So I will be pilot drilling in each case to avoid that, or hopefully. So that's the stage I'm at just now. Well, that's the dial fitted after a fashion. It's not as flat here as it was meant to be, and I'm just trying to see what's holding it back from actually lying flat, so as I can make some adjustments here. It's flat here, but it's slightly raised there, so I need to see what's holding that, and I think I can see it. I need to chop a little bit out to a little bit more clearance. I thought I had catered for all of the clearance that was necessary, but clearly not. That's the clock now in place, without the face on it, so you can see there it's screwed on underneath, 2 bolts, and space for the pendulum, and the bell has got enough movement to go back. So I'm now going to put the face on it, try it up in the clock, and see how we go. This isn't a slide-on hood, this is a top-down hood. And that's it. I've now got the movement fully installed, pendulum in place to the right length, chains clearly and weights doing the job of driving the movement. Took quite a bit of trial and error to get the pendulum in the correct position, and the correct weight of pendulum on the pendulum stick. That's 115mm diameter pendulum, on this one, and ample room in that case for it to move back and forwards in its arc. I had an issue with the chime or the strike being just beyond the hour, and I was unsure on how I should fix that, if it was something to do with the setting of the movement or if it was something else I had to adjust. I couldn't find any information specific to this Hermle movement online, so I wrote by email to Hermle in Germany and asked them what you could do. What I did find was that you take off the minute hand on this type of movement, and quite simply you put a square tang through the hole in it, and you just essentially turn the hand round on the collet slightly to get it to match the actual time that you want. I thought that was a bit of a brutish approach to something that's meant to be a delicate clock movement, and I couldn't believe that was what the case was, because I thought when they manufactured the units they would manufacture them so that the warning strike came in at a certain position, but and that would all be part of the movement, but that's not the case. So as it was striking just beyond the time, I didn't use a square tang. I just gripped the collet with a pair of point nose pliers and basically pulled the hand into what I thought was the right position, set it back in place and adjusted it over and over again. Well, when I say over and over again, a couple of times to get it right on the hour, as it is now. And what I'll do is I'll just advance this forward to the 10 o'clock. I'll not move the clock because it's at the right time, but I'll hold the video and then reset it again just before 10, so you can hear the single bell strike on it, which is all I was after. I didn't want any fancy Westminster chimes or anything, so you'll be able to see that in a minute.